Can you hear
There
me
you
now?
go. I can hear you now.
Good.
Verizon, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I can indeed. I can indeed. Welcome, John Paul. Do you like John Paul? Do you like John or do you like JP?
Most people say JP or John Paul. Either way, I'd say I'm a chameleon there. Anyone but Paul because that's somebody else.
Yes, that's your dad, right?
That's right.
You know, I had a friend in high school named JP, so that's easy for me. Just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, I think Seth Resnick and Mike Newler at Canon did that to me years ago. And when people in the studio started using it, oh, this is going to stick, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I
Hey,
still,
that's better than the nickname I got stuck with in high school.
yeah, those. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Well, I'm so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's nice to
I'm
see you again.
stoked. Yeah. Well, it was a million years ago. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't remember me, and I wouldn't be hurt or insulted or anything.
And we're that old, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. I've had two kids since I was in Maine. And I came up to your workshop for your fine art printing too. Rented a place. My mother had just had a bout with uh hospice that
Uh,
she needed to kind of get away from.
yeah,
Put her in the cabin and rode my bike to your workshop. It was a beautiful week. It was sublime. It
good,
really was.
good, good. Yeah, Maine is a pretty
Yeah,
special place. Yeah.
it is. I was just checking out your 3D shows of your work. Tell everybody a little bit about what you do, because I think you have a really unique niche. And I was looking at these 3D, uh, the 3D spinning images of your gallery in Maine.
Oh,
It
yeah.
looks just like I remember it. It's so peaceful and beautiful.
Good. You know that is the space that I live in every day when
Lucky
I'm not on the
bastard.
road. Exactly. Um, it's really nice when you can align your personal life and goals with your professional, and sometimes the professional makes excuses to make the life you want to make.
Isn't that the
So
dream?
yeah, it is. You know, and so when I get frustrated with galleries, I do my own show,
Nice.
and it has allowed me to be somebody who works better with galleries because I've already done my show, and then we can do our thing together in their space. But the more important thing is that space. I consider it a vacuum. There's so many square feet. I can hang anywhere from 15 large prints to 30 smaller prints, and I have a deal with myself. Only new work. So
Oh,
nature abhors a vacuum.
uh-huh.
It means I got to fill that space every year, and it keeps me productive. It also means
Nice.
that I have to put together a show, not
Yeah.
just assemble a random number of images and hope somebody else will come up with a statement. I have to make the statement.
Yeah.
Then I put myself on the spot. Not only do I understand how to market an event like that, which makes me more able to deal with galleries and more professionally,
Yeah.
um, but also I put myself on the spot and make myself do a gallery talk
Mm-hmm.
and force myself to say something about the work. In other words, before the doors are open, I've considered, what's my line? What is this all about? How can I
Yeah.
offer points of entry for people? But I learn a lot about the work that way as well. And then that's always followed up by a question and answer period.
Yeah.
And the questions that people ask me help me a great deal too. It's, oh, people are getting that. Oh, that's not quite clear. Oh, I never thought of it in that way. Oh, that's a great way of saying that. I get a lot of great feedback just by talking with people all weekend long. Sometimes we'll do it 2 weekends, but for the most part, it's a 1 weekend event.
Yeah.
And we get anywhere from, well, on a 2 weekend events, I think our highest number was a little over 1,500 people passed through in about 4 or 5 days.
Holy moly, that's awesome.
It's pretty cool when people will come all the way up from Boston 3.5 hours away to see
Yeah.
this event. But it is an event, and it has
Yeah.
really gotten across to me that seeing prints is an event. Most of the time, we're
Yeah.
swiping left or right.
Yeah.
Uh, it's rare that we actually see prints, much less our own prints, all dressed up.
Yeah.
Um,
And your prints are so spectacular because they're big and you really do a nice job printing them. The subtleness to your prints is just spectacular. I love that. Your work is focused on the environment, but it breaks a lot of the rules of composition and traditional landscape photography, if you will.
yep.
Um, do you want to talk a little bit about your background, just to give some people some context? Maybe people don't know who you are. Your work is like you've been to Antarctica and you've photographed these icebergs and these halos, and you've got all this color. But how did you kind of come to this voice?
Had to live a life to get here. Part of that voice was always there. Part of that has come out of influences from other people and the influence of
Hmm.
the experiences that I've had.
Hmm.
So it would be one thing to think that somebody is talented, they're born that way, they're born with a voice, and it's just a matter of letting it out. Like Michelangelo could see the angel inside that block, and all he had to do was chip the stuff away.
It's
You
a
know, to
nice
some,
myth. It's a nice
well,
story.
yeah, and it's a nice perspective. Stories are good for perspectives, but if we think that's the end of the story, well, I think there's always another story or more to the story. I think to a certain degree, part of that is true. My connection to the natural world has been with me since I was tiny. It
Hmm.
didn't hurt that I've always lived very close to it in the Connecticut woods or out in the Irish landscape or in the woods in Maine or out in the desert in New Mexico. I've rarely, aside from going to college, lived in urban environments.
I
Um,
didn't know you went to Yale.
yeah, yeah, I did that. Yep, yep.
Yeah, I did that. I did a thing.
I did my time at jail. I mean Yale. Yes. um,
Um,
yeah, and I,
your
and I
dad.
had a love-hate relationship with the institution, but I learned a great
Mm,
deal from it, and probably wouldn't be the writer that I am today had I not also studied literature as well as art at Yale.
mm,
In fact, part of that was a bureaucratic mess up. Um, I was the honors student for our humanities course
yeah.
in high school, which was our senior English. But he was really one of the best teachers I've ever had in my life. You kind of count the great teachers who really shift the course of your life, the direction, and kind of open your eyes to another way of being or deeper way of being. And
Mm-hmm.
Bob Kurth at Santa Fe Prep in Santa Fe, New Mexico, was one of those people. Uh,
Mm.
but the school called senior English humanities. So when I got to Yale, they said, "Well, you haven't had senior English, so you can't take Lit 101." And I was green enough and in awe enough of the institution that, well, okay, what can I take? Well, you can take Lit 1. It's a remedial writing course. Just yeah, okay. All right. Just out of dumb luck, I ran into one of the other best teachers I've ever had in my entire academic career, Jonathan Friedman, who was really teaching us a writing course, one of the best writing courses I had in my academic career. And he said, "Hey, kid, you got some talent. If you're serious about this, every one of the colleges has a writing tutor. Take every paper you write, no matter what it is. Doesn't matter whether it's physics or it's poetry. Take your papers to your writing tutor. You'll learn a lot." So I took his
Yeah.
advice. Um, they were fantastic. So sometimes you have these little mistakes or bumps or detours in your life that aren't, maybe they're not really detours, but they're just opportunities that look
Yeah.
like obstacles at the first time. So
I had
then
a
I got
go
wise
ahead.
the next semester. I really wanted to take this modern poetry course, but it was only for, get this, seniors,
Mm.
English majors. If you were a senior English major, you could take this course. It was R.W.B. Lewis teaching poetry. He brought Robert Penn Warren in to read his poetry. It was fabulous. Well, he didn't ask if I was a senior, and I didn't tell him. I got my A, and we
You
were all
snuck
good.
in.
I just quietly sat there, and he didn't tell me to leave, and we had a great time.
Nice.
Yeah.
I had a professor once in college, painting professor, that said there's only happy accidents. And, that's another thing I didn't know is that you took painting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So when was the first time that you picked up a camera? You're trained in painting, but you're known for your photography. How did that transition
right.
happen?
You could blame it on Photoshop.
I will. Photoshop is the gateway drug.
I do. It was kind of like a Godfather 2 moment. I knew that if I threw my glove into the ring of photography, I'd always be measured by the accomplishments of my father. Right. So it wasn't something I went into lightly, but I thought, this tool is just perfect for me. It's exactly like the tool that I saw them doing separations for Elliot Porter's book, Intimate Landscapes,
Love
the
Elliot Porter.
SkyTex machines.
Mm.
Yeah. Gorgeous. But then in those days, back in the mid 70s, that technology cost millions of dollars. Mom called the Cytex machines $1 million coloring books. Uh, how am I ever going to get a hold of $1 million?
Yeah.
And then in 1990, there was a Macintosh. It was a Quadra, and Photoshop
Ah.
won. And there was my $1 million coloring book. I mean, my second mortgage. And it didn't cost $1 million. um, so it allowed me to blend the photographic background and the painting background. I had been studying photography not seriously until I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, I've got a great teacher, my father, and he was. Uh, I can learn how to make good reference for photographs because I want to do some surreal work, but I really want to take what's in my mind's eye and make it clear,
Yeah.
not only for the public, for myself as well, to develop those. I
Mm-hmm.
remember visiting when I was studying with Dad in the summers. I took one semester off, and I helped him teach a workshop in Ireland, and we
Mm.
visited an old family friend of Fergus Burke, who was the photographer for the Abbey Theatre.
Ooh.
So you're going into the family business, are you? Uh, well, who are your influences? Uh, Blake, Durer, Bosch. No, photographers. Oh, Jerry Olsman. Oh, pick another. He doesn't count. you know, can you imagine saying that post Photoshop? But this was really pre Photoshop, and it was just a fascinating collision. Um,
I love the accent you do. You do it really well.
spent some time over there. If you're actually Irish, then it's terrible.
So
But
when was the first time you went to Antarctica and you started to blend environmentalism in with your photography?
well, Antarctica wasn't really the first time I started to blend environmentalism.
Okay.
I have to blame or credit. Um, one of my heroes was Elliot Porter,
Mm.
who went to Antarctica long before most people were on a National Science Foundation grant.
Mm-hmm.
My mom did, she designed and helped curate the book that he did, Antarctica. And so
Oh,
when I saw
cool.
this late 70s, early 80-year-old going down there several times and talking about it, showing photographs of green icebergs, and some of them roll and pick up a lot of algae. Um, I was hooked. I want to go there too. A lot of things happen around Elliot, Cytex machines, Antarctica. Uh, but that dream didn't come true until about 2005. But his all the conversations we had during those productions at dinner. My mom used to get into pie baking contests with him, and you know, he
Elliot
was
Porter baked pies?
yeah, made a great apple pie. He was New Englander, so was cooked a little longer than mom's. Didn't have as much lemon rind, a little bit more brown sugar. They had
Mm,
just a different kind of taste, right?
you're making me hungry.
I know.
I just made an apple pie the other day and it didn't set up right.
Right.
Mm.
I overcooked the two that I baked a few days ago. Supposed to
Your
put it at
mother would be
450.
horrified.
Well, just don't tell her, right?
I won't.
At any rate, there would be times where Elliot would just push me and I really appreciated this because here I was a teenager, and here's this late 70s, early 80s gentleman, very distinguished, not stuffy, but accomplished and intellectually rigorous. I really appreciated his keen wit, and he's pushing me, and he really wants to know what a teenager thinks.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, you're too young to have a conversation with. Not at all. He wanted to know
Right.
what I was thinking. He probably saw me as part of the solution to the challenges we all face, the people he wanted to inspire. So he would
Yeah.
lay it on heavy. He says, well, it's your generation that's going to decide whether you hand on a habitable environment or not.
Ooh.
Right. No pressure, Elliot. So I saw Ansel Adams and Elliot Porter doing such great work with environmental advocacy through photography. But I also saw them uh, get disappointed. Elliot
Mm.
considered his a place no one knew, a eulogy, that it got published too late to do anything about the Glen Canyon. And,
Mm.
certainly Ansel had successes, but also many disappointments. And I just felt, okay, so there are a lot of people following in their footsteps. Could there be another way to expand this dialogue, this way of interacting with an essential issue that we've been dealing with all along as a species, but now we're at a critical point with it.
Yeah.
And I continue to look for that. I've just written 25% of a book on mindfulness practices in nature. Uh,
Oh, cool. I can't
three,
wait to see it.
three
I
books
have
to
your
read.
Antarctic book, and I have your Photoshop book, and I have two of your prints,
Yeah,
and your dad and son edition, and one of your prints from the workshop. But
yeah.
I'll be very excited to see the art in mindfulness because I just completed 3 years of Enso paintings. You know,
Mm,
where you draw the
yeah,
circle.
yeah.
So peaceful. But I was combining it with like drips, like modern painting and, street art. And then have you seen this trend with line work where, some people are calling it like wormholes?
Mm,
You are using a lot of geometry in your work now. I've been watching your work evolve,
yeah.
and your work, had that kind of Ulsman feeling in the beginning, and now it's become a little bit more, dare I say, Zen or like it. Some of your aesthetic reminds me a little bit more Japanese meditation
Mm.
now. And I noticed that you're still teaching, still out there working around. So we're talking about art and what you're making. Where do you see your art going, and how do you evolve your art besides just writing? I love that about writing, by the way, writing about your work. Some
So there's like,
influences in art and writing.
yeah, there's like two or three big questions in there.
There is. I'm sorry. I can't help myself sometimes. I get in these conversations with other artists and I just want to know everything.
Right. Um, Short term, I'm sure there's going to be some kind of collaboration with publishers and or self-publishing effort, because while there have been MagCloud catalogs and blurb books, there's never really been a monograph of my fine art. Uh,
Mm,
and I think to be effective, this nonfiction book uh, probably needs to be published in standard channels, even though the opportunities for publishing, self-publishing are greater and easier than ever before. I want to reach a wider other audience, expand the audience. And so I think collaborating with somebody makes the most sense. Um,
I think it's fabulous that you're doing art as meditation. So you're looking towards traditional publishing channels. I love this idea. So will it be accessible, do you think, to the general public?
there's zero point of working with a traditional publisher unless it is accessible. The publishing industry has been in crisis for more than a decade. And I can't say that my relationship with publishers has been an easy one.
Hmm.
But then I think it's been challenged for quite a long time. I've watched Eliot change. I mean, he was disappointed when the run on American Places was, I don't remember, it was 10 or 20,000, but he was disappointed because his previous books, they were going to publish 40,000. Now a distribution of 3,000 is a wide distribution. So we're talking about the mass marketing to 3,000 when many people in their social networks have hundreds of thousands. I mean, 30,000 people get my newsletter every month. 1,000 people every month hit my, well, every day hit my website.
Hmm.
So is the beautifully printed book really mass distribution? It used to be before the
Hmm.
web, but now I think we have to reconsider the function and purpose of a finely produced book. And there are many ways of doing that. And I think in many cases, we're going back to very limited edition, expensive books that are going into collections or are meant for a specific audience. I remember when Robert Glenn Ketchum, who also heard Eliot's story about his Glen Canyon portrait being a eulogy, um, he worked tirelessly to make sure that his book Tungus got into the hands of senators and testified before Congress to help that become a national park. Now that's
Oh,
effective.
wow.
Yeah, it's a really cool story.
That
Uh,
is really cool.
yeah, yeah. So, um, all bets are off. We have more opportunity than ever before, and people are saturated, oversaturated. So, how do you create an experience for people that they really connect with? And are you creating it with the people who are most receptive to it, who can do the most with it, who might pass that kind of activity or information or mindset forward, or it might inspire them to go and do their own thing, and they really will do something rather than just
Right.
consume it and move on
Right.
to the next thing to consume?
Right.
Maybe mass distribution and huge audiences really isn't the goal, but maybe a targeted audience where it's really meaningful, and they're able to go and move the needle further forward, like Eliot really was in many ways, passing the torch to the younger generation for so many of us, to me, to Robert Glenn Ketchum, to others. How do we pass the torch to other people, regardless of their age? It's not just a generational thing.
Yeah. JP, you said something that kind of resonated with me there, and it leads us really nicely into the idea of product. So we've been talking about your art, right? And how you're evolving it and how you want to do this book for art as sort of meditation, but you've also done a lot of fine art. And so as a product, I often talk about in the appeals about how important it is for creatives to have different revenue streams and different price points, like a price ladder. So you have an introductory mass market type appeal thing that's accessible to people, maybe 10 to 20 to $50, and then you have something at the next level and the next level. And a lot of the artists I talk to do commission work as kind of the top level.
Hmm.
Now your work is in museums, and I was fascinated to see, when I was doing a little bit of digging, that the American Museum, I'd have to look over here, but they're collecting one of everything that you make. I
Yeah,
was like, what? I
yeah.
thought that was fascinating.
Well, I
I
thought
want
it
to
was
know.
too when Shannon Parrish approached me and said, "We want to do that." They also wanted my first computer, my first copy of Photoshop, the first digital
What?
camera, because they have a large collection of technology in photography. They have my first iPhone. Um,
Does it still have your fingerprints on it? Will they be able to clone you from your?
I don't know.
It has a little spit, a little bit of fingerprints. They'll be able to clone you in the future.
Oh, that's funny. Right. I just thought it was so interesting that they took such a broad
Fascinating.
view.
Yeah.
To me, it is the most interesting collection of my work. There are other museums who have several prints, but nobody has the breadth uh, that Shannon assembled for the Smithsonian. And, and so I continue to look for collectors who will donate and expand that collection. And as my career grows, there are other times where I'll just send her things. I started doing these MagCloud books, just as a way of producing quick $10 catalogs for my exhibits that could be customized for other people's venues as well.
Now, what is this?
What's
What?
that?
What? 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 What are you doing? Mad Cloud books? Huh?
Yeah,
Wait.
they're like little soft cover magazines like
Yeah.
Blurb. Blurb ultimately bought MagCloud, but MagCloud is cheaper. Their quality is slightly better. Uh,
Okay.
and they're really accessible. So if you want to produce a catalog of your work, 24 images in a little square format for under $10, you can do it. And I
And
do.
you, as the fine artist, do that.
I make it part of my regular practice. It helps me develop a series. I work in series, bodies of work, ways of seeing,
Right.
right? So I don't really consider a series complete. I don't mean finished, but complete until I have enough images to create one of these catalogs. And one of the, it's a book, so it forces you to think about a sequence, a beginning, middle, and end.
Mm-hmm.
It forces you to look for gaps. There needs to be a kind of an arc, like in a poem or a story. You
Yeah.
start somewhere and you kind of move somewhere else where that could even be emotionally. It doesn't have to be literal. And you have to write something about it too, even if it's just one page. You try and
Right.
write something interesting. So it forces you to do a lot of great work that will help create a better understanding of what you're doing, a better understanding of where you're going, and greater depth in what you actually produce.
So this little book is like $10. It's totally accessible. So that's like the bottom of the product ladder. Is there the same images that you use in your gallery shows in your annual gallery show in Maine then? Do
Yeah.
you synchronize those?
Yep.
Brilliant.
Right. So if I've finished a body of work and that's what's being featured in that exhibit, there's the catalog. And people can order them online, so I don't have to keep an inventory. But
Oh,
actually,
that's
the bottom
brilliant.
of the chain is a free ebook that I give away, which I've started actually just
Nice.
giving these things away. If you got the last art newsletter, Collector's Alert, which
Mm-hmm.
I've done once, twice, 3 times a year for the last
Mm-hmm.
5, 10 years, but I'm going to go quarterly at least this year. And I'm just giving these ebooks away. Because if you
And what do
print,
people do with them?
well, the ebook actually lets you A, experience the work, B, read it. You don't have to pay the
Mm-hmm.
$10, you just download it. But you can also click on the images and it'll take you right to my gallery. There could be a post, it could be a video, or it could just
Mm-hmm.
be that image that goes right into the gallery where you can find more information about that image and purchase it right there. So
Oh,
with
it's brilliant.
one click, you go into the gallery that allows you to purchase.
You know, in marketing, they talk about opt-ins. And
Yeah,
there's this big trend now where you go and you get a free downloadable PDF in exchange for your email.
yeah,
But not many artists are doing that. That's brilliant. But it also, the fact that it links to your online store is fantastic.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Terrific.
And it's accessible. I love it. I love
Right.
it. So, what is your full range of products that you kind of make and do?
There'd be like a free ebook. There'd be a $20 ebook. There'd be the DVDs are a little long in the tooth. They're about $70, but we'll probably have some video content coming up.
I have one of those. I used them in classes. Great, great DVDs.
Good. I'm glad you like it. I remember talking to David Duchemin a few years ago and said he sent me in one of his latest books and signed it nicely for me. Said, what can I give you back? You want a set of my DVDs? Said JP, I don't even have a DVD player. I'm sorry, I'd love it, but like, okay, it's time to move that online and fresh it up. But then there's
Yeah.
only so much of me to go around.
Yeah. You are so
2021.
productive. So productive.
I can just come up with so many ideas, so many things I want. And I've actually been spending the last couple of days reviewing all of my projects, missions, goals, actions, plans for the next year, reviewing how the last few years have gone, redoing all of that for the planning. And I just, you come up with so many ideas, and then you got to look at what kind of time you can actually spend and
Yeah.
what is most important for the coming year, with your longer term goals in mind. If I didn't have longer term goals of, I was tired of being the Photoshop jockey and teaching the digital printing courses at all of the workshop programs that are out there. I was the first at Maine, first at Santa Fe, etc.
Yeah.
But they never let me out of the lab. And I feel like I've got more to teach, about
Yeah.
storytelling, about vision, about exposure, about land,
Yeah.
mindfulness. So I kind of had to make my own way. And I started shifting the brand a little bit and offering my own workshops out in the field.
Uh-huh.
Um, those things don't happen unless you have a plan. I know so many of my friends, photographers, it's about the spontaneous moment. You can't predict anything. It's all about the light. It's about that decisive moment, which only happens in the blink, and you just have to be ready. Tell it to Annie Leibovitz. Tell it, tell it to
Yeah.
Jerry Olsman. Tell it to. There are different ways of working. That is absolutely a very valid way of working, and it's worked brilliantly for Jay Maisel. But it makes it harder for him to curate his own books. He usually needs somebody else to curate it, much like
Hmm.
Elliot did. I think these days we're called as creatives to do more of the pieces of that production, from
Oh, yeah.
making the images to curating it, and maybe even getting in there and designing it if you were finding somebody that you can work with. But we have to be picture editors at the same time. We have to be
Yeah.
the people who plan our projects, because the old ways of doing things just aren't being done anymore. Um,
Yeah. Well,
and
we're
there are new
solopreneurs.
opportunities.
You got
Yeah.
to do it all. You got to be the accountant and the web designer and the graphic designer and the book layout artist.
And at some
You got
point
to
you
be the
got to
podcast
figure,
host.
yeah, exactly. You got to make this stuff really easy and get good content. If it's not
Yeah.
easy, you got to partner with somebody who's got those skills to help you make it happen, so you save the time to be able to do the other things.
I love that idea of partnering. I hear again and again that one of the tips to success in the arts is networking. And partnering is really just networking. It's just the term networking people I think are scared of, but it's really just making friends.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I think Austin Kleon's been using this word genius. People have a
What?
genius, and then also people have a genius. In other words, some people are natural born networkers. I forget, I think Malcolm Gladwell calls them connectors,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
In Tipping Point. And so the word genius is not Austin's, but he's revived it. And I think,
Hmm.
well, is some people are really good about finding different communities, connecting different people. And, how are you going to say, making sure that those connections, or finding ways to make those connections really vital and productive. You
Brilliant.
maintain them. I think that's actually separate from collaborating well with people.
Yeah.
uh, to actually create something together requires yet another set of social skills and a certain lack of control freakedness, but also the ability to evaluate partners.
Compromise.
Yeah. Being able to sync up with people and being
Hmm.
able to select people who really are going to bring something to the table and can execute it.
Mm.
Right? Because if you partner with somebody who can't execute it, look what happened to Chase Jarvis on his app. His development team didn't see what could happen. Chase had what he feels should have been the next Instagram, but his
Mm.
team got in the way.
Bummer.
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to touch on your planning process, but let's save that for remind me to talk about your planning process here under Automate, because I think we're at presentation and I want some of your advice on presentation because when I came to your workshop, you hauled out these portfolios that were like 4 feet
That's right.
wide. Yeah, this big.
Not this big. They're this big, and they can
They're
fit on the
big
table.
though. Well, I'm small. So to me, they were enormous. I was like, whoa, because you had a 13 by 19 print matted in
Right,
them.
right.
And that was the first time I'd ever seen anybody mat a print in a portfolio,
Hmm.
which just took it to that like next notch. Like, I mean, I'd seen portfolios. You go to Dick Blick or Michael's or whatever, and they got the traditional black leather portfolio with the plastic sleeves, and you slide your 13 by 19 in. And
Yeah,
that looks cool. It
sure.
looks good. But yours blew me away. And then I sat there and watched you sell work at your workshops. And that got me thinking. I was like, started running the numbers and I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. This man is brilliant. Not only is this the most gorgeous display I've ever seen, I'm surrounded by amazing, beautiful work in this refurbished barn, whitewashed walls and ceiling, white furniture, wood side tables, and then you plunk this museum worthy portfolio down. It was stunning. So, tell me about how you learned about presentation and how important it is to you and you think it is to an artist.
Sure. Um, first, I watch how other people did it.
Yeah.
And I am lucky. I saw my mom produce Ernst Haas's creation portfolio, many of Elliot's portfolios, many of my dad's portfolios, and these were actual, beautifully crafted, limited edition boxes of several prints. I'd
Yeah.
seen Ansel Adams as a kid. Dad's teaching out at the Ansel Adams Gallery, where the Ansel Adams workshops out in Yosemite, and Ansel is bringing out his portfolios. He's selling portfolios. So
Yeah.
I'd seen people present that. Um, it's really interesting to look at how William Clift presents his prints, always one at a
Wow.
time. So you have this intense come close experience. But that's part of it. The glass is away. You're there with the artist. You're wearing the museum gloves. Yeah, it says handle with care. It also says, I respect this. This is precious. Take care with this. I care. But just putting together the portfolio and dressing it up, and then all of the things that go into making a book, it's the same kind of thing with a portfolio, a little bit different format, but you have to think about a sequence, and you have to think about selecting your best work and how best to present it and how much to say. And that's a conversation, which is also really special. That again that's a different event than hanging work up on the wall and letting people walk through and they say that was nice. Presenting a portfolio is an intimate experience with one or maybe 10 people, but you don't present a portfolio to an audience of 100 people. You can't get around that. You gather around. It's a kind of a communal experience. And so it becomes a
Mm.
conversation as well. They ask questions, but that's also from a marketing standpoint, since we're talking about marketing, that's a way of deepening the connection. It's
Yeah.
not just about telling people what's on your mind. It's not just about hearing their feedback and learning. All of that is great. It's also helping people make a connection. And so, when mostly you're handing the prints and then sometimes you hand a print to somebody and they get to hold it.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that's like taking ownership. That's way beyond where we're beta testing Lightroom version 1, where you guys are going to get the free version, and then where you upgrade, you have
Yeah.
ownership of this thing. No, you're holding this thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah,
Yeah. Well, in sales, they talk about putting it in somebody's hand.
yeah.
I met a salesman at a conference a couple of years ago, and he said, well, you put it in their hand and then you ask them for the sale, right? And I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, you put the product in the person's hand and then you say something simple like, can I ring that up for you? Can
Sure.
I put it in a bag for you? And I was like, Really? You just like that?
You do have to ask, but there are many ways of asking, and
Yes. But putting it in
I
the
have a tendency
hand.
to just overdo it. I try and create just an irresistible value proposition to get people in. They want this. They have a special experience. This helps them remember that it means something to them. I
Yeah.
think by the time all that has built up, not just a here, hold this. Oh yeah, you just bought it. No, it's not that.
No.
It's about developing a relationship and extending that relationship and making it more meaningful and more personal. You know.
Yeah. And that is a perfect segue into educating your audience. I mean, it's all about the story, right? You're talking about connection. Um, and Maria Foley, with the B School, I don't know if you've seen her all over the internet advertising, B School, B School. She tells a great story about buying a rug in like Morocco and how they went and looked at these, and the guy brings them, coffee and this and that. And she says, we came back to the guy because he looked us deadpan in the face and said, "You're going to buy from me because I told you a story." But it resonated with me too. I think story is so integral, experience of, and that's what people want to be able to share afterwards as well, is that
Absolutely.
story,
Yeah.
that memory.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
you hear this in the $12 million shark as well at the very high end. Some of the collectors say, "Oh, I just bought a Gagosian." You mean that Mondrian? Yeah, yeah. Let me tell you the story. Or let me tell you a story about Mondrian. Or, you know, some of the collectors don't even know who Mondrian was. They just purchased it because it would make a good story and it would make a good impression to their
hmm
peers, right? And
hmm
they knew they would get an ROI on it. Um,
right,
so all kinds of stories, all kinds of reasons. But boy,
right.
I went into a Moroccan rug shop swearing I would not, not buy a rug. And
Really?
I bought a rug. Those guys are brilliant.
Oh,
Brilliant.
do tell.
Man, if I could import that guy to help me sell my art, holy smoke. I just,
Now I got to go to Morocco and get swindled to buy a rug. I need
I got to
need
tell
me
you
a
who to
rug
go to
story.
because the performance we got was unbelievable. I almost want to call it high art. It was an extraordinary experience that lasted several days.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. No, this guy was unbelievable. He didn't just sell me a rug. He sold Seth 2 rugs before. And this is after he sold 12 rugs to the rest of our group.
He was on a roll, man.
Oh yeah, and then he gave us the kickback, and then he took it back. It was just like it was an amazing cultural experience, and
Yeah,
I didn't need a rug, right?
but you
But
got one.
every time I walk across that rug, I remember Yusuf and that entire experience, and how much I learned, and how much I still have to learn about other cultures.
Mm. And you are an amazing educator. I mean, you give so freely with all your workshops and all these different touch points where people are, the free ebook, the cloud book, the catalog, the portfolio, the fine art. Like, how often are you traveling? Especially with COVID, like how
Yeah,
has COVID kind of hit you? I know you traveled a lot. Like, how much did you travel before and how much are you traveling now?
I think at most I was traveling a little more than the third of the year.
Okay.
Between conferences and lectures at universities and workshops that I was teaching.
Yeah.
That was a little much, and I got it back to about 25% of my time. Uh,
Nice.
COVID has been entirely, and I also got back to different kinds of travel as well.
Oh,
Well, yeah, you know, I I do actually really love contributing to other
yeah.
people's growth. That's I think that's what makes you a good teacher, and you figure out how can I help, and then
Yeah.
if you don't know how to help, then you go figure that out, and you become a
Yeah.
better teacher. Your students make you a better teacher.
They
There's
sure
that
as
old
heck do.
right. Thank you. um, yeah, there's that old Chinese proverb which I absolutely love. Um, we hear and we forget, we see and we remember. It's often been extended. We do and we know is the end of that, but it's often been extended. If you want to become an expert, you write, and if you want to become a master, you teach.
I never heard that before. I
Yeah,
love it. It's a
yeah,
great quote.
right. And I think
Can
it
I
gets
quote you?
well. It's not me, absolutely. I mean, the proverb is hear, see, do, but then more recently it's been extended in contemporary circles. So you can add in,
Hear, see,
write
do,
to be an expert
teach.
and
Hear,
teach to be a master.
hear, write, see, do, teach. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back and get this transcript and I'm going to be pulling that and putting it up on my wall.
Yeah, absolutely. Ancient Chinese proverb. Very good one.
And
Send
the
it.
other one, may you live in interesting times.
Oh, geez, right? Yeah. We need to learn how to draw that character. You'd
Oh,
like to
God.
draw a circle, but we're drawing that character this time. So, yeah, COVID has completely changed my travel schedule. I got back from Antarctica in late February, about a week before they shut everything down.
Wow.
We were aware and certainly concerned about some of the Chinese tourists who were with us on that boat, and many of the Chinese tourists didn't make it on that boat.
Mm,
So some of the Chilean friends of the company who run that boat at that time of year joined us. We were seeing it hover, and then got back and everything shut down. And so I didn't travel and hardly left the house really, though I've got a wonderful backyard. As you know, I'm tucked into 20 acres of forest on the Maine coast. I'm a quarter mile away from an inlet. I can't see the open water, but it's salt water. You can swim in it. So I'm
nice.
surrounded by nature. I'm also
Mm,
isolated. Maine has been doing extremely well. I think Maine
mm-hmm.
and Vermont have been doing the best in continental United States.
Right, right.
It's just not that many people here.
Yeah.
We're used to being self-reliant.
Yep.
It helps some of us monks to have this downtime. This is the sabbatical my therapist has been saying that I need for years. I've been telling her I can't afford it.
Forced
And it's like,
sabbatical.
JP, too bad. And here you go. You can't go anywhere. You got to cancel your print workshops in the summer.
Just call
I,
it maternal leave. And
sure.
then, at the end, you have this new baby, this new spectacular.
I'm, I was hungry to recharge. You
Yeah.
give, and you do need to fill up the tank. And I knew I needed to fill up the tank. I had planned to take 4 to 6 weeks off the minute I got back, just to finish a few projects that I needed to do and just change that. And again, fill up the tank. I was feeling it. And,
Yeah.
I got 6 months before the next event, and I've only traveled to Utah in October during this time, but
Hmm.
it has been one of the most creative times of my life. I've produced,
Really?
yeah, I produced almost 200 images. I wrote a quarter of a nonfiction book, took a workshop about that. Took a workshop with Richard Blanco, Obama's presidential inaugural poet, Latinx, Cuban immigrant, wonderful guy.
Cool.
Um, I studied poetry and I've always dabbled with it. Haiku has been a long practice for me, but I've wanted to do other kinds of things. One of my 30-year bucket items, or end of life items that's been on my list for 30 years, is to write this one book of poetry. So I wrote it and two others. Um, it's been a phenomenal time to have this great pause and
Yeah.
use it to fuel that creativity. And again, when we're doing the things we love, we energize ourselves in a very particular way.
Yeah.
And I get energized when I teach, but I'm also tired at the end of the week.
Oh, yeah. It saps you.
But you love. I mean, to some degree, if you've inspired somebody, empowered somebody, they go away glowing, saying
Oh,
like,
yeah.
okay, I matter. I have contributed. It's awesome, right?
Yeah.
This is
It
this
is.
this is a different kind of awesome. This is I have spoken my truth. I have found aspects of myself I didn't know existed before. I've connected things that are important, by making the work, by doing the work. We call it work. Yeah, it's work, but it's also deep, deep play, and it can be spontaneous and refreshing, and it energizes you in an entirely different way.
Yeah.
So I am very grateful that I've had as much time and that it hasn't been more challenging, that my family is healthy, most of my
Hmm.
friends, though some of them have been challenged.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful for what I have, because this is a really, really dark time. And
Ugh.
to have this place to retreat to while you're hearing the body count, while you're hearing the case count, while you're seeing the
Mm.
race riots, while you're seeing the political system crumble. I mean, wow, has it been hard to keep our head above water, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. And we
and at the
need
same
that
time,
creative outlet.
yeah, I look out at the birds, I write my poetry, I make my images, I connect with my loved ones. I try and do what I can. I'm thankful that I
Hmm.
can give some things to other people. Um,
I'm really interested. So we're talking about educating, and this is a perfect transition actually into amplifying. So you've had this amazing time to create over 200 images. That's a lot. And I know that's a lot because I know how much you manipulate them. And I know how persnickety, I'm going to use that word, persnickety you are about your printing. I mean, I asked you at the workshop how many prints you pulled, how many color tests you pulled until you got one you wanted. And you were like, oh, I don't know, maybe somewhere between 100 and 200 or something like that. I was like,
Uh,
what?
you're as Italian as I am. It didn't usually get beyond 36. And color management has gotten so much better these days.
Right, right. So how do you plan? You mentioned earlier, and I said I wanted to bring you back to it. How do you plan out your goals? Because it sounds like you've created this huge body of work. You've had this wonderful, rejuvenating downtime. How are you going to come out of this and amplify?
Right. In other words, get the word out, present the work, etc.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sticking point for so many artists is, I know a lot of artists that are really prolific,
Yeah.
but they're not good at promotion.
Right. Right. It's challenging. It really is. And
Yeah.
even if you're good at it, yeah, I think there are only a few people who are good at it, so good at it they can do it all by themselves.
Mm.
It's one thing for uh, my wife, my friends, my gallery dealers say this guy's a genius, but if I say I'm a genius, how does that sit, right? Like
Yeah.
raging egomaniac. I mean, it worked for Picasso, but even Madonna isn't quite that way. You know what I mean? She's
Although
good, but like
yeah.
uh, she's genius. She's also genius. Um,
Yeah, she
so
is one hell of a coordinator.
she's brilliant at planning. I often like to put Madonna and Picasso together because they morph brilliantly. They're able to do something new and it surprises us all, but it doesn't seem like it's a completely different thing. It seems somehow related to what they've done before. So it's this surprise, but it's also
Interesting.
connected. And they're able to, in addition, not just that's part of the marketing, the story behind that personal growth, not just you're connected and they are, not just they've got genius and they do, not just you're good at presenting yourself and they are, but what's going on in their work is A, really interesting, and B, the way that they present it and the way that one body work moves into the next is quite fascinating. I mean, it's smart.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I never would connected the two, but now I'm going to have to think about that.
Yeah, I'm like that. I once quoted Goethe and Guns N' Roses in the same sentences. I just cracked the whole audience up. Me too. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know where this stuff comes from.
Random.
Well, shake it up and see what comes out. Sometimes it's fun.
That's the best teaching, though. I love when teachers pull in random little tidbits of pop culture with historical culture because it makes it relatable, I think, for the students.
Yeah, yeah. Things come from places,
Yeah.
and whatever
You
you
know,
do has consequences.
I was teaching like an art history class or something one time, and I brought up For the Love of God, the skull that's been encrusted with diamonds by Damien Hirst.
Yeah,
And this was a community college. I was teaching to a number of students, a very diverse group from Philly and from rural Pennsylvania. And, to show them this and to say his hands never were on this skull. This is a real human skull encrusted with real diamonds, and to reference pop culture and rap with their fixation with diamonds and to say, is this art? If he's never touched it and it's and he sold it for how many millions of dollars? Like, let's talk about this.
yeah. It was the largest single payday for any living artist in history. He had gone around his galleries and just had his own solo Christie's auction. Talk about brilliant.
Yeah. Like,
Wow.
I don't even know what to say to that. And to have that conversation with 18-year-olds and 19-year
Yeah.
olds is so much fun, you know,
Yeah.
because they kind of get a little horrified.
Well, some of it is real showmanship, and you wonder about the depth, the content, the substance of the things that are being brilliantly marketed. And there are art objects that are a lot of hype. And so how
Yeah.
do you separate that out? I think that's one of the crises our culture is having right now
Hmm.
in this notion of secular pluralism. I'm okay, you're okay. It's all interesting, man. How do we make value judgments? Uh-huh. Even that,
Mm.
value judgments, right? It's like,
Mm. Right.
right? Because we are hearing so much of that along race lines or economic lines or political lines or, but at some point you have to start making some substantial qualitative, strong quality statements about what constitutes quality, not just quantity.
And I
Otherwise, we
think,
just reduce ourselves to economic entities, and it's just a matter of what sells and what's ratified by institutions that hold less and less authority.
and I think that's the job of the artist. That is our role as artists, is to help foster and nurture the aesthetic of a society.
Yes, but I think it takes the entire society, and the society needs to be articulate, involved,
Hmm.
concerned. They also
Hmm.
need to realize they're a part of that process. And there are other people along the way, the people who write, the curators, the people who communicate well about this stuff, whether it's Pauline Kael about movies or it's Wolfman Jack about rock and roll. We
Hmm.
need some people celebrating this stuff in a substantial way and saying, this is good stuff.
Yeah.
Once in a while, you need to say, that's crap. But if you're going to say that, then tell us why. I much prefer the statements that celebrate work and say, this excites me because of all of these reasons.
Yeah.
Start to find out what's good about the work and then start working in other ways.
Yeah.
I think we've lost the ability to say, that's hype. There
Mm.
really is nothing there. It is a blank canvas. How many times can you do that? I
Yeah.
remember going through the Chicago Art Museum with my nephew. Uh, I'd gone to see this little Max Ernst collage show, and he was, coming with me. He's in his teens, and we're walking through the atrium, and there's some Ellsworth Kelly stuff on the walls. Big orange triangle, round orange green circle. I say, "What do you think about that?" And he points to the metal posts that are holding the little wire that's keeping you away from the wall. He says, "You mean that?" I said, "No, but I understand. That's a good point." It's like, some Ellsworth's earlier paintings are really exciting to me, but the rest of them are just, oh my God, orange triangles, green squares. What's next? Lucky Charms?
Yeah, but the little wire is the presentation. That's the perceived value.
Well, that's part of it. That's
Don't
also just,
touch.
that's the,
It's valuable because we say it is.
right. I think we need to say more than it's valuable. I think we need to say it's valuable because, or here are the reasons why I get excited about this. And did you know this about this work?
Yes.
Those are the kinds of things that a really good curator or a good writer, a good tour guide, they can
Yeah.
open that kind of stuff up. And if, as younger artists, as developing artists, if we don't find people who will do that for us because we're just not in the system yet, or we're not commanding those kinds of prices, then we have to learn how to do that ourselves.
Mm.
But we could be having those conversations in our social networks. We could be having that on our websites. There's a lot of places we could be doing that. We have more platform than we've ever had before. Now, what do we want to put in that amid
So,
the limited attention span of the global public right now?
yeah. So, how will you edit your content after this long sabbatical, and how will you plan to release it? Pulling you back to this amplifying thing.
Sure.
How you were talking about your planning process. Break it down for us a little. You got all
Uh,
this work, you got 200 pieces,
yep.
and what are you going to do with it? How are you going to reuse and uh, release that content? How will you edit it? And then how will you release it?
Right. So I may be doing things a little more prematurely on one body of work that I've held back for 10 years and finally finished this year. I've been developing those ideas. I have a folder full of sketches. I've got a lot of material in different folders, but I actually executed it this year, got it started, and it's only the
Mhm.
start. And it relates to my Antarctica work. It's called Global
Okay.
Warming, and
Uh-huh.
it just takes climate grief, climate anxiety head on. I've been kind of avoiding it and trying to do the inspiring, get connected with nature. Beauty transforms and lifts us up with hope.
Mm-hmm.
In this dark time, I just, look, I've been listening to the younger kids in their anxiety and grief, and it's real. And I've been repressing it for a long time. It's like, it's time, just do it. And having this
Mm-hmm.
conversation with my son, who's 19, I said, like, amid COVID, can I really release this climate grief body of work? He said,
Mm-hmm.
Dad, it's always going to be, it's timeless. It's part of our story. Yeah, you could do that. You go ahead and do it. Certain things on my website just delayed me until probably next month after.
Mm-hmm.
January, February, I'm going to release it. It's going to be an online gallery talk. I've already got the video produced.
Okay.
The ebook is inches away. I've kind of already curated that and put it together. So for the ebook, I need 36, 40 images. For the catalog, I need 24 images. And it's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
fun to say, okay, so I've got these 50 to 70 images. Which ones are going to make the cut? What am
Mm-hmm.
I going to lead with? How am I going to present it? It's going to be a newsletter. That newsletter goes out to about 16,000 people right now. The ebook is going to be free. You can buy the catalog if you want. I'm not making much money on either one of those. Doesn't really matter. I make it on
Mm-hmm.
the print sales, right? And
Yeah.
it's really just a prelude to, I'm going to be taking this eventually to publishers as well. The Antarctica book, I'm looking to either publish or self-publish. And that's the big question that I've got for this
Yeah.
year. Can I find a
Yeah.
publisher who's really going to do their job and really going to get it out there? If
Mm-hmm.
they're, if we're going to be talking about distribution well in excess of 3,000, and if we can really move some copies in the right ways, then fine, it can be that kind of thing. Otherwise, why wouldn't I just do 1,000 copies for my audience?
Yeah.
The people who are going to buy it anyway. If I do it with the publisher, that audience, my audience, is going to go to that publisher.
Yeah.
So the publisher has to bring some new audience into this game as well, not just we're going to use the spaghetti method, the Italian method, kind of cook the spaghetti.
Throw it against the wall. See if it sticks.
If it sticks, it's ready. If it doesn't, well, next artist.
Actually, I think that was the honey boo boo method.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
So
So
you
anyway,
actually keep all of your research materials in like a folder. I was just actually doing an
yeah,
interview earlier, and I was talking with a wonderful story illustrator, Benjamin Hummel. He's also a professor and a chalk artist, and he uses one of the accordion folders, and he puts emails in it for any given project. He puts emails and references and blah 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 blah. So you do
yeah,
something similar.
yep,
You use an analog system to start.
yep. And there are digital equivalents as well, but I also like to print them out and just have them in a folder. It's hard for me
Interesting.
to do some thumbnails. I'm still trying to train myself to do the quick sketches and drawings on the
Yeah.
iPad. I can, but where do you file those? It
Yeah.
really helps to have things in one place. And that's
Right.
kind of like, that's like a gallery show. That's like a
Yeah.
book. That's like a video. It's all in one place. And because
Yeah.
it all gets together, you say, oh, this stuff is related. Now I see patterns. I see relationships. I see possibilities. I see gaps. Just it's a way to
Yeah.
collect that stuff. But
And
it's
then you
also,
put everything also digitally, maybe in Lightroom.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And then, oh, wow. I love it. I was looking at your website and you have a new video on your homepage. I'd love to point people to go check it out because it talks about all the things you do. It talks about your
Right,
color grids and
right.
your sketches and how you work in all these, what do I want to call it? Not iterations. That's not the right word. Sketches, preparatory
Sure, sure, right.
explorations.
I call them studies.
Yeah, yeah.
As a painter, we'll do a lot of studies, preliminary drawings, sketches, even preliminary quick paintings before you actually make the final painting.
Right.
Richard Serra will do this with his sculpture as well. He'll draw some things. He'll do some small maquettes or little
Mm-hmm.
tiny unfinished sculptures before he makes the big sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that photographers tend to be thinking in the same way. They've got contact sheet, but then you select the one that made it. And I don't think we spend enough time thinking about what a study is, what constitutes a study for a photographer. And also, you can see that, so Richard Serra is working in sculpture, but he's also drawing and he's also
Mm-hmm.
writing some notes. He's using words, he's using drawings, he's using abstract pictures before he makes a
Mm-hmm.
physical thing.
Hmm.
So I think as photographers, we can do all of these things and realize that they don't have to be the thing itself. They don't have to be finished. It doesn't have to be a perfect sculpture. It doesn't have to be a perfect drawing. It just
Yeah.
has to be a way of working an idea out. And Thomas Edison, when he's creating things, in order to build the phonograph, he handed his team a tiny little drawing because he couldn't just describe it in 400 words. Even if he did, it wouldn't make as much sense as the simple little drawing that he made. The minute they saw the picture of something that didn't exist yet, they
Yeah.
said, oh, okay, this is what we're making. So that may be helpful for us as creatives. So I
Yeah.
do that. I study color before I make the final image that is informed by my understanding of color. My understanding of color is deeper, better, more personal, more sensitive because I've spent some time developing that relationship with color. Same thing with composition and landscape or any number of things.
Yeah.
So I try a lot of things and developing those studies and those, I have a long list of experiments that I try both photographically and with other things
Hmm.
to teach myself to understand more, to bring that to the final work.
And
So
they
that,
all go in this collection together
yeah,
to
that's
help
actually
you.
like a separate catalog in the lightroom because there's digital paintings and there's scans of drawings and yeah, it's a separate thing. But also I finally put together an ebook and a gallery talk, which is like a video, just
Hmm.
like a flat gallery that you talked about the 3D. This was flat,
Yeah.
but there's voiceover now, so you can go click on the little play button below the image and hear what I'm thinking about that.
I love
And
it. And you've got that
you can
deep
download it for you.
baritone voice. It's so soothing. It's so satisfying. Hashtag
Great.
satisfying.
That's great. It's been very interesting to produce the videos for all of these series. It's not something that I just dabbled with it. I just tried it at one time. And when we produced the first one, and I work with my last studio assistant, that's the last 2 years, the first time I haven't had anybody working in the studio with me in
Hmm.
20 years.
Really?
Uh, yeah. And actually kind of at the perfect time because I needed to not be on anybody else's schedule and COVID and to really maximize that kind of quiet time.
Yeah.
But CT Charles still comes in and helps me produce those videos, or we do it with a lot of sending files over the net. He's a great video editor, terrific sense of audio, and
Yeah.
he's got a great way of putting the images together. I rarely have to tell him, change this sequence because he just nails it the first time out. But it was
Ugh,
fascinating. He worked with
so
me for
valuable.
10. Oh, geez. Talk about working with
Invaluable.
someone. I'm looking for other people because I didn't know whether he was still available for a little while. He was really busy with his other job. Um, and some people were saying, well, why don't you just do it yourself? I was like, jeez. And that's one more thing. I probably can learn how to do it in Final Cut, but I'll really miss CT's sense of the background music and the timing and all of that. So
Yeah.
he's still with me, thank God. Um, there is a good example of collaborating with somebody with skills and a sensibility that really helps it. And
Yeah.
reason I was going for that is I never planned to do these videos. They were just trying to see how you would animate the website, make the work stickier. But when we finally produced the first one, CT sat back and said, I've been here 10 years and I finally get it. So that's
I
really
don't know if that's
fascinating.
a good thing or not.
Right. Well, you
Damn
wonder.
it, it took me 10 years to get through to you and you've been editing it? Oh, crap. Sorry. I can't help but
Well,
tease.
there could be several things on that, but I think what happened there is that he made a greater connection with the work because he spent that much time thinking about knitting it together in an intelligent way. More to the point, there's something very powerful about music, voiceover, and image all together. It's a very
Oh,
powerful
yeah.
delivery voice, and it's not just CT who started to react to those videos. Other
Oh,
people
yeah?
were, wow. I remember my friend Mike Quinn calling it, that's some next level shit, man. What do you mean?
Yes.
He says, I finally get it. you know, um,
Well,
they're
we will link
connecting.
to it down below. You guys got to watch it. You
They're
know,
connecting in a different way, which is
yeah.
really kind of exciting. And I didn't anticipate doing that. And to make
No.
the text for the voiceover, I had to take the artist statements that I wrote for those little catalogs we've been talking about making and
Right?
trim it down so I could get it to 4 minutes or 3 minutes
I was going to ask if you pre-wrote that because it's just spot on. It's melodic. It has a sense of poetry to it.
Which I was really surprised when I started this workshop with Richard Blanco, the poet. Uh, he was saying, but I think you've already kind of been writing very poetically all along. It's like, and I think poetry has a way of cutting to the essence of things. It's very
Hmm.
compact and forwarding emotions in a
Mm,
really important way. And so to let that emotion up well and then add music that will help that well even
hmm.
further, I think can be very powerful. But yes, I wrote that ahead of time and really tried to condense it. Um,
Well, it talks about what you do and it talks about these exploratory studies and it really, I think it's insightful and it's inspiring and it talks about presentation too. I just did an interview with David Emmons of Vermont, and he's teaching Facebook marketing, and he's a crafter. He makes these beautiful hanging water gardens, and he was talking about the importance of stickiness,
yeah,
which you just used that term.
yeah.
Um, do you want to talk just briefly? You've been on the web forever. Do you want to talk about the evolution of your website and stickiness and um, how these videos have helped with that?
Mm,
Just real briefly, I don't know.
sure.
Some people might want to know. You've had a lot of iterations of your website.
I have.
What's it built on?
What's the foundation of the website?
Yeah, nowadays, are you using WordPress?
Oh, yeah. I don't remember what we first built it with. We converted it over to concrete, and we're currently converting it over to WordPress. The art section,
Mm-hmm.
that's where you're going to find all the images and the studies. We converted last year over to WordPress,
Mm-hmm.
uh, so that's built solely on WordPress.
You
And
use
my
WooCommerce for the sales?
Nope, we're using one shopping cart for our
Okay.
commercial sales,
It's a
but Woo is
massive website. I mean, if you guys
yeah.
haven't seen it, he's got educational free, you got a ton of free educational stuff. You've got sales of prints, you've got resources. I love the way you tout and tell people straight up to help out with the environment. You're walking the walk and talking the talk. Wait, I think I had that backwards. You're talking the talk and walking the walk.
Sounds good. Maybe we should turn that into a poem. That's pretty good actually. Nice rhythm there. Anyway, yeah, it's a massive challenge because there's so much information there. Now, how do you get it across in an easy to find way?
Yeah.
And there's no perfect solution, and it's constantly been a challenge. When I first started the website, I had about 5,000 subscribers, and I told my web designer, I don't want to blog. I just don't have that much to say. boy, boy, was I wrong. And when I finally caved in and did the blog, thank you for laughing. It kind of doubled the traffic, and then social networks kind of came in, and if you would, put what you posted on the blog on the social networks, that doubled the traffic again.
Okay.
All ways of just helping that snowball. But then also, the videos are in response to, I think, the way that people consume information and
Mm-hmm.
um, interact with images has changed dramatically. The attention spans have gone down. Um, we're just skimming through so much information. You're really competing for uh, people's time. I mean, amid so many possibilities. I mean,
Yeah.
I, the same device that I'm having this conversation with you on, I've still got my web browser. It's got 12 tabs open, and there's the email program and all the things that I'm supposed to get. There's a lot competing
Tempting.
for my attention, right? So, how do you make such a strong value proposition that people are going to want to spend their time with you and keep their attention? Because while they're watching your video, they're probably going to get a notification from Facebook or from some email or who knows what. You've got to make it really compelling. And so those 4-minute videos are one way of addressing that, but they're also a growth point for me. What do I really want to say? How do I create an arc in that little time? And how do we pick the right soundtrack that's really going to help grab people emotionally in a way that Might have been a much
Yeah.
more passive, quiet, or longer experience. I love those more passive, quiet, longer experiences, but I can't expect people are going to have that on their Apple book. That's probably better for a gallery,
Yeah.
or maybe a book. That maybe that's part of the function of a finely printed book. And you have your favorite glass of wine by the fireside, and you spend some time with something.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But I love having all those touch points, and having all those options. It's almost like teaching students. Some students are visual learners, some students are auditory learners, some students are hands-on. They need to do, feel, touch.
Yeah,
Some students need to write it out.
yeah.
Same with people consuming images. They need all these different methods for consumption. How often do you post on social media?
I have given myself leeway to not worry about it this year. David Duchemin actually just logged off. I read a book called Deep Work, and he was just watching. He needed to um, manage his headspace and spend more time on the creative things that were really fueling his soul and making the most difference, not only in his personal life but also in his business. So it's really bold for a guy like that who's got strong following to kind of check out. So I
Yeah.
generally I used to post a couple times a day. For a while, I tried at least once a day, and then for a while, the blog I would post every day.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's about once a week. Um, I'm really looking at finishing a number of sections on my website. There's a section on sharpening, there's a section on black and white, there's a section on
Mm-hmm.
color. I'm kind of finishing those chunks, having
Mm-hmm.
curated them into a table of contents, and
Mm-hmm.
some of them will become ebooks also, because
Yeah.
this looking at a blog is different than reading an ebook. Some of them will
Yeah.
become video. They might even become online courses as well.
Very cool.
Right. So I've been finishing those things just in a targeted way. Problem is, I've got so much content and so many irons in the fire and so many new ideas coming out. Just got to be careful about what I commit to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is why I've been sitting and trying to plan for the last, several hours a day for the last 3 days, because this is around the time every year, end of the year, I just take stock and say, so what do you want to happen in the next year? And most of the time, the important things happen. I think it's really important to say, what's the number one thing you want to happen, and make sure that's a priority. And also maybe the top three,
Mm-hmm.
but then realize it's not going to go according to plans. And boy, was 2020 the year to say things are not going to go according to plan. Just not going to happen. But
Nope.
never in my wildest dream would I say, I want to make 200 images. I usually release around 50 images, somewhere in there.
A
Right.
year. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is plenty. I mean, that's enough for a book, right? If
Yeah.
you're good.
That's a good collection.
Right.
Strong collection. And,
So it's 200
speaking
in a
of,
year. I never would have
yeah,
said, I'm going to write a couple of books of poetry, 3 books of poetry this year. No way, man. You don't have the time for that. Well,
right?
guess what? You do. So 2020 didn't go according to plan, but there were some really awesome things that happened. And many
Yeah.
people will say, well, so don't make a plan. Just gets in your way. No, 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 no. I agree with Paul Allen. Planning not to plan is planning to fail.
Mm.
No, sorry. That's
Sometimes,
that's Benjamin Franklin. Sorry.
sometimes planning the first step is the first step.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that leads us to licensing and contracts and then success. Do
Mm.
you license your work much?
Not as often as I would like to, but that's because I don't have an agent going out there and pushing it, or haven't worked with a stock agency. Most people think of me as the fine artist, so he would never, which
Hmm.
is not the case. Um,
Yeah.
so yes, I do sometimes, and
Hmm.
I know how to read a contract. Many artists don't. My good friend Seth Resnick knows how to read a contract better than anybody else I know.
Oh,
So I have
yeah?
other people. Yeah, he's amazing. Um,
What's his
so
tips or tricks? Share it with us. Because this is the section where I like to try and give advice on licensing contracts. We hear all over again and again and again. Read them, read them, read them. Don't be afraid to go back and negotiate, talk, ask if you don't understand something. But we try and talk about it in, real English,
right,
because people are so intimidated by these contracts. They're either so excited to get one that they don't want to argue
right.
and they just sign it, or they're so terrified of it they refuse it or nitpick it. What are your tips or tricks?
Uh, if you're going to sign the boilerplate contracts, you really need to be aware of two risks you might be taking. That they might be, I was going to say buying, but sometimes they want it for free, all
Mm.
rights in all known media or any media soon to be invented in this universe or all future
Or
universes to be
next.
discovered. This is kind of the standard. Adobe, I love Adobe, but their standard contracts prohibited me from working with them in a commercial way. Them licensing my
What?
images, I would have let them use because they've been so responsive. I've beta tested, I've alpha tested, I've helped, they've listened, got a good
Yeah.
relationship
I mean,
there.
you've got like how many of their printers? You're like practically a rep for them.
Well, that's Epson, and Epson gets it right.
Okay.
This is Adobe with their boilerplate contracts, and
Oh,
they
I'm
they
sorry.
want
Yeah.
all of that. And in addition, here's the second one you need to look for. Number one, there's no point in selling rights for something that they're not going to use. So on the contract for my book, they were saying, well, and we also want the electronic rights. So you got any plans to make something with it? This was before the days of ebooks being widely distributed.
Right.
They said, well, probably not. So what do you need them? They're separate rights. You want to pay for them? I'd be happy to keep them in the contract. Otherwise, take them out. And they wanted the book contract enough to say, oh, okay, it was a separate issue. So you need to be careful about selling rights that aren't going to get used, because sometimes they get tied up with somebody who's not going to use them. And why wouldn't you be able to license it if somebody else wanted to use it for
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? The real thing that you need to watch out for, and we've all gotten used to signing terrible contracts like TOUs on social networks. The TOUs for Instagram and Facebook indemnify Facebook.
Can you
Should
define
they?
TLU for?
TOU, terms of use.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that jargon, right?
Yeah, I hate acronyms. They
Well,
piss me off because they're so industry specific. You go from one industry to the next, and you might have the same acronym and it means a totally different thing. And then
I
people
know.
look at you like, oh, what are you, stupid? Because you don't know my acronym?
Yeah. Okay. Any rate, the terms that we signed that have not been tested in at the Supreme Court level is that if Facebook licenses the images that we post in those social networks to somebody else without our knowledge, without ever paying us, and the person who uses that image does something that's offensive and they get sued, we're liable for that, not Facebook.
What?
What? This is why a lot of us logged out. This is why my Instagram account stopped for a while and it deleted all the images. Many of us signed out just before Facebook bought it, because we were protesting the TOUs. Didn't go anywhere, so everybody's signing them, and it hasn't held up in the federal court. But that's another case of why we need smart people who are copyright sensitive and a healthy culture that will stand up for artists' rights, because they
Right.
don't in Australia or other China. Forget about it. I mean, as American citizens, we enjoy a sense of intellectual property, the ability for any creative artist, writer, anybody who
Hmm.
creates something, it's their.
Uh-oh. John,
Yep.
JP. Oh, there you
I
go.
know. I skim the keyboard. Italian, so I talk with my hands, and sometimes bad things happen. I once spilled 3 glasses of wine on Vinny Versace while we were talking about publishing this
Wait a
very
minute,
same thing.
3
Yeah.
simultaneously or in a
No,
row?
no, in a row. It was with Bruce
Oops,
Fraser.
sorry. Oops, sorry. Oh, I did it again.
What are you talking about, Bruce? And another glass of Pinot went that way. I was talking to Bruce, but then he got the brunt of it.
It's the Italian thing.
Yeah, it's the Italian thing. So you got to be watch about, are you liable for anything? It's unnecessary. And you got to watch for, are you signing away rights that you're not getting paid for?
Right.
Those
Brilliant.
2 things are really, really important.
Right. Last letter in the acronyms appeal. This has been an epic interview. Epic. S for success.
That's for
How,
success.
how do you measure success? We as artists, we tend to just hop from one project to the next. We have so much creativity in us. How do you stay focused? How do you measure your success? And how do you celebrate it?
Right. And we have a hard time with that last part, don't we?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Right.
we just skim right over it and keep going and never stop to take stock of what we've accomplished and
Right.
pat ourselves on the back a little bit.
I really got to answer your first question first. So don't let me forget that second.
Okay.
The most important thing to do is do exactly what you just did. Ask yourself the question, what is success? Define it for yourself. I mean, if you're going into photography or the arts for the money, it's a bad choice. So few people really do it. Realize it's a lifestyle. You may live a very rich life with a very lean bank account. So what is it that constitutes success for you? And do you need the external validation of I sold a print, or I was collected by the Museum of Modern Art, or I did X, Y, and Z? All of these external milestones. Those are really just things that will fuel the bank account that will help you go to Antarctica or do the next project or, pay the bills, of course, right? You need to do a certain amount of that in order to, keep living all the other domestic things.
And artwork is work, and we do deserve to get paid for it.
Absolutely. And if you're lucky, let me pull back from that. No, let me include that. If you're number one, persistent, I think so many people give up too early. If you're number two, you work smart, which means number three, you're informed. You also need to get lucky, number four. But if you stay in the game, that persistence thing at the very beginning of it, you want it so much, you stick with it, or you love it so much, you stick with it.
Yeah.
Eventually, some breaks will come around. Your breaks are going to come faster if you're clear about what you want. Set intentions, because then you realize those opportunities will float by you and you might not be ready for them. You also have to think flexibly, because, if you're, look, if my goal was to go to Antarctica, leave me alone. No, I don't want Michael Reichman. Thank you for inviting me in 2005 and paying me to go. No, I just want to go by myself and make my own little artistic body. It never would have happened. Right. I went to teach, but I also
got to make your own stuff too.
Started an important body of work for myself. Now I've gone 12 times. We're going to be going on our 13th trip in 2022.
Lucky 13.
Yeah, right. Lucky 2022, right. You have to think flexibly, right? So it's so important to define what success means to you. And so part of that is doing some soul searching. What are your core values? What do you really want to accomplish with your life? Now we're at that vision and purpose stage, not so much the project, not so much the separate actions that go into completing that project. And those qualities aren't necessarily attached to external validation. I published a book. I was collected by this museum. All those things that in many cases depend on other people, and you can't always control that, right? You can help stack the deck in your favor, but you can't control other people, and you can't guarantee that other people are going to respond the way that you want them to. You can absolutely guarantee that you will do something, and that you will do something that means something that's important to you, right? If you identify, where's your passion? Where's your bliss? What do you really want to do? Right? You can do that, right?
Yeah.
It may not make the most money, and you may need to steal some time to do it. It's ridiculous. It took me 30 years to steal these mornings to write 3 books of poetry. There's all kinds of excuses we can make. Right.
I love the fact that you call it stealing time to make something creative.
You have so many people to say that, and you really have to be careful when you take something, your creative life, that's very vital for you, that does have personal value, emotional connection. In some cases, for some of us, and I think for many of us, even if we're not religious, it has a spiritual component, keeps us alive spiritually.
Yeah.
So now we're going to tie that to making money for somebody else.
Yeah.
By shooting the latest wedding. And weddings are awesome events, but
weddings are a challenge.
They're a real challenge. Right?
I've shot a couple. I thought I gave myself carpal tunnel just from one wedding.
Or you're doing product photography. Is that really going to feed your soul? Well, no, maybe it's going to feed your family. And so you do some of that. I mean, Ansel Adams did portrait work for a long time.
Yeah.
George Tice did, they took the funny little pony around with a camera and they shoot the kid on the pony for a long time.
Really?
Yeah. What did they call them? Kidnappers. It was the old term.
What?
Yeah. They were just joking. It was the photographer who went around, rode the pony around, put the kid on the pony and, shot the photograph. So one of our top photographers in the history of American photography, they do these commercial things, and we just don't talk about that. Right. You
Right.
got to
We
find
don't
something.
celebrate that, but you've got to pay the bills somehow. So, but
Yeah.
then you still got to make time to do the spiritual stuff.
And if you don't, you burn out. Sean
Yeah.
Kernan has written well about this. Sean Kernan's website's great. Um, it's linked to my saying I needed to fill my tank up, and
Mm.
now I'm able to give more to others. Right now that I've
Yeah.
filled me up, that balance is going to shift on any given year. You just
Mm-hmm.
have to be clear about your goals. So
I
define
love it.
success for yourself. Now, back to the other, I mean, you asked a really important question, and I think it's so challenging for us. Somehow we were raised with this notion that we should be our own worst critics. And we do in order to
We
improve
do
our
that
work.
well.
We do it a little too well. And we do it way too consistently. I think it was Natalie Goldberg. I could be wrong. One of those great women writers, contemporary, wrote, you know, if you talked to the person you were in a relationship with the way you talk to yourself, they'd have left you long ago. Like,
Eat.
what happened also to being your best coach?
Right.
If you can't afford Tony Robbins, do it yourself. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Sure, I'd want Tony Robbins as a coach, to be honest. I
well,
find him
whoever's
intimidating.
okay,
He's
pick your
so
favorite.
big. So
Is that?
he's
Pick
just
your favorite.
metaphorically big. He is just
I think there's a lot to learn from Tony. One of my favorite TED moments was when he was giving his TED talk and Al Gore was in the audience.
what?
Yeah,
What'd he do? What'd he say?
oh my God, it's one of these brilliant media moments in just media, like in the history of media. This is a brilliant moment. So Tony's up there giving his TED talk, and he's
Yeah.
talking about how people make excuses, and he does that great Tony thing where he shouts out, this, and he gets the crowd to do that. You never have
Yeah, yeah.
enough, and the crowd comes back. Time. You never have enough money. You never have the right. And Al Gore pipes up, Supreme Court. Just totally derails him, and Tony's been up there so many times, like, this is 18 minutes. It's TED, right? And he's just like, after everybody stops laughing and he stops stunningly, he looks over to Chris, the guy from the whole TED Talk stuff, says, we're going to need a couple more minutes. And he gives Gore a critique. He says, no, we were all rooting for you. You were the smartest and the most qualified candidate, but you failed to connect with people. And that's why you lost the election. Right? So here's Tony Robbins critiquing Nobel Prize winning former vice president. Now,
Oh my God, that's epic.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Amazing.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah.
Oh my God, thank you for sharing that with us.
At any rate, yes, there are times to be critical, but ask yourself always, is this helpful? Right? And we also need to be better about celebrating our own successes, not expecting other people to do it, not being desperate for that, but being able to say, this is really good. This works for me. I am proud of this. Do that work and give yourself that acknowledgement.
Yeah.
We need to do that. I understand that people are worried about becoming narcissists or egomaniacs or yada, yada, yada. No, we've swung the pendulum so far in the wrong way. We need to do that kind of self-care, and in some cases that also is the legitimacy for doing the things we need to do, even though it doesn't necessarily have the biggest paycheck. Like the thing that I did this year, right, to fill my tank up. I've been teasing my colleagues, hey, I found a profession that I can make less money in than photography. Poetry. It's like but I've been talking about making poetic images for a long, long time. And
You think I'm almost scared to ask. I don't want to insult, but you think you'll ever incorporate your poetry into your photography? It's so trendy now to have words, particularly inspirational words, in images.
Right.
You think you'll go there? Will you do it? Will you conform? Not conform.
What do you think? Conform? Me? Really?
No. I'm choosing a silly word.
Yeah, but it's actually a really interesting question. I've wanted the poetry to stand up without the images, and I want the images to stand up without the poetry. So I'm cautious about publishing them together.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there can be a really interesting synergy. I made a print that was half poem and half image from my dad
Oh, yeah?
for his birthday this year.
Did he
Um,
like it?
yeah, yeah. Other people loved it. I got one of those critiques. It was funny.
I've been
But I
encouraged to
liked it. It
put,
was interesting for me. It was just a
yeah,
good exercise.
yeah.
The idea of having text in images has always fascinated me, and I want to do it well when I finally do it. I
Hmm.
can't imagine that I won't do it. You're already seeing many graphic
Elements.
icons, glyphs, drawings, that kind of thing. The
Yeah.
drawing, right,
I
is
love
already
your incorporation of the sacred geometry type of geometric. I love it. I took sacred geometry in grad school with Mark Reynolds, and
mm,
fascinating,
yeah,
fascinating subject.
yeah, really is. Yeah. So something will happen. I don't know exactly how or what. I just have to do the work to find out.
I'm really fascinated to see if you go there because, I know I've been encouraged to do that by friends, but I'm so reluctant to label an image with a word and exclude
Yeah.
exclude the other meanings that people might come to if it didn't have words.
Right, right. I think we have to be careful about the words that we use. I think that's one of the reasons why visual artists resist them. They feel like they're going to explain away the mystery or fix one interpretation of the image. And
Yeah.
if you use words well, it doesn't do that. It opens up windows and doors. If you don't use them well, it can do exactly that and be very limiting. So the question is it helpful?
Mm.
One of the things I think is also important as we talked a lot about business tonight.
Yeah.
And a lot of artists have a complex about that, that
Mm.
somehow, and it's supported by the culture. I, I remember for years, I have heard the phrase, oh, he's not an artist, he's a businessman. In other words, if you're good at one, well, you couldn't possibly be the other because all
Right.
artists must cut off a certain ear, live an impoverished lifestyle, and be discovered after they're dead.
Oh, yeah.
Absolute nonsense. And
Right.
you
Thank
don't have
you.
to you don't have to like Damien Hirst, but let's talk about some of my favorites. Bosch, Dürer. Dürer used new technologies, the printing press, to become one of the most successful artists of his age.
Didn't Durr put a copyright statement on his work?
I don't think it was a copyright statement. Are you thinking of the signature he had?
No, no. I have a really amazing book called Secret Life of Artists, and
Yeah,
it's kind of cartoony, but I'll have to send you the thing.
yeah, I'm
It's
aware.
actually a little print that
Yeah.
says, if you reproduce my work or whatever, you thieves, and it's written in like old English. I'll dig
Oh,
it up
really?
for you. It's
Oh, please.
great.
That would be awesome. I'd love to see that. It'd be like one of the first copyright disclaimers. That's
It is.
fantastic.
It is.
Right. Yeah. So, so there, look, I mean, Charles Dickens was one of the most famous and celebrated and well-paid writers of his time. So was Mark Twain. It keeps going. In many cases, the success fuels the recognition. I feel like we are gifted by
Mhm.
the work, by the sensitivity, by the actual activity, the privilege to do this stuff. And yes, I do think there's some kind of muse out there that helps us along, though I wouldn't say you need that to do the work. But I'm just saying that it is a higher calling and you have a responsibility to be effective with it. So
Mm.
whatever rationale you have, I need the money in order to do the work. I need I need to be effective in a financial way or in a publicizing way in order for the work to be more effective because I
Yeah.
want to honor the work. However you want to approach it, being more effective at business is being more effective with your work. So don't listen to the chatter that you can't be good at business or that somehow by being good at business, you'll be a lesser artist. Absolutely not the case. In fact, it can be the opposite. Yes, if you let the business run roughshod over all of your creative inspiration, if you change the ideas or the expression because the market is more responsive to it in that way, but it somehow cheapens it or lessens it or makes it more shallow. Yes, those are the pitfalls, of course. And of course, as you're running a business, if you make your creative life your business, you can end up satisfying everybody else's ends and burn out and not be able to do the creative work. There's this beautiful balance. But business and marketing are the engine that allow you to continue doing the work. And by doing them effectively in your own authentic way, everybody does it a little differently. You can do it in your own way. So you find a way of forwarding your voice um, in your way, and finding your way is what this is really all about. So it's
Yeah.
part of the process.
I love that idea that marketing can be in your voice. I never thought of it that way. I think of artistic voice, but a marketing voice. I mean, they call it brand, but
Yeah.
I think I like thinking about it as a marketing voice.
So, but everybody wants authenticity these days. They want something real. They don't want just the same slogan they heard from Coke. They want
Yeah.
to know, what's going on with Erin? What's going on with JP? Who are
Yeah.
they really? Right.
Yeah.
So if you can find out what your real voice is and deliver that in a confident and effective way and say, hey, this is what it's really about. This is who I am. People are hungry for that. I want to listen to that. I don't want to listen to the same old jingle from Pringles. Who cares? Like, right. I'll care about Erin. And so, in that respect, as you see large corporations looking for individuals to tell their stories, we've got a golden opportunity. Just be yourself, really be yourself. Get that message across really effectively. You're going to
Yeah.
have to do some soul searching to figure out what that is, but it's going to be tremendously fulfilling. And when it becomes successful, even more so.
Yeah.
And to that note, when I went through the climate reality training with Al Gore down in Atlanta last year, I have to say, it was fascinating to see Al Gore 3.0, who's been hanging out with Reverend Barber preaching a little and showing us how to give the 10-minute version of his speech. But the most effective moment was in one of those little breaks where they had this young little, I don't know whether she was 8 or 13-year-old African-American girl, all backlit, beautiful, with a little bit of music, reading one of her poems.
Mm,
It just so sticky and impactful.
right.
Like it got you. And
Right.
I remember Gore's Fire and Fury, but what I really connected with was this young woman and her future.
Yeah.
So individuals, seemingly insignificant, they are not. They are so important, and we are all one of them. So go tell your story.
Brilliant. And on that note, go tell your story.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to catch up with you.
Yes, definitely.